Hello.
Hello, my name is Niall O'Sullivan. I'm a poet. Most people know me as the guy who runs Poetry Unplugged, which is the regular open mic, pre-pandemic, of course, at the Poetry Cafe, which runs every Tuesday. But I teach poetry at London Metropolitan University, and I'm an editor, a senior poetry editor for Fliptide Publishing as well.
Brilliant, very concise. So
Yeah.
we're talking about publishing. I've got a couple of questions for you, if that's all right.
Yep.
And then you're going to give us a little task as well.
Yep.
So my first question is, what should we be sending in to publishers if we're trying to get published?
Poems. Okay, that's my smarty pants answer. I think the first thing is obviously don't bombard people with unsolicited manuscripts. I think that would be the most important thing. If you want to submit to a publisher, then firstly look online to see if they operate something where they're open for submissions. So if a publisher does seasonally open for submissions, you might find a page where they say we're currently closed for submissions, but we will be reopening at this time or at a later date, so keep an eye on this. If there's nothing like that, contact them and ask them for their submission criteria. So ask them for what their process is. Be nice and polite, because that's the first thing they'll be looking out for. Any signs of, if it's someone who they don't feel will be pleasant to work with over the amount of time that it takes to bring out a book, that's the first thing that will let them know whether they want to look at your work or not. So ask nicely about their submission criteria, and then normally they'll help you. They might be, if they're a massive publisher, they might say something like, we only work with agents. But a lot of smaller publishers they might say, hey, send something in or whatever. Don't worry too much about introducing yourself when you send these emails, informing them who you are. But they'll either know who you are or not. Just ask nicely and politely and briefly what the submission criteria is. If they're like, oh, you're this person. Oh, I didn't know you were bringing out a collection. Then they'll do that themselves. But if not, they'll hopefully politely go, well, either we're not open submissions right now, or we're Penguin. You need an agent. Or they might say, hey, yeah, send something now. You never know. They might say something, for instance, like send us 20 poems. Let's say they said send us 20 poems. Don't put 20 poems in a zip file. Stick it all in one document.
Okay. Is that like just a Word doc or like a PDF? Or
the PDF can help, actually, because sometimes a PDF, your formatting is all there. So I would normally say a PDF. But again, they might say what they prefer. Some might say send in a Word doc.
If they're interested, it will go to an editor. Tell us about some of your memorable experiences as an editor.
My three most memorable experiences as an editor would be, one, working with Chip Grimm, because Chip Grimm is a good friend, actually. And I kind of been working with him for ages, and it was kind of a long process, but it was really fun working with him on his collection. I think Emma Hammond, actually, just because she was someone whose work I really enjoyed, I really respected her. And it was really nice to be someone to bring out a collection. I think she had self-published a lot of stuff. It was really nice to kind of say, do you want to bring out a collection with us? And she was just a really interesting person to talk about poetry with and to work on her poems. I guess the negative one would be the one time I think I worked with a poet and their work wasn't ready for publication. And I just dealt with it the wrong way. And I was quite inexperienced as an editor at the time. Nowadays, I just wouldn't work with someone. If there was a point where I'm just helping them to workshop or redraft their work, I wouldn't work with them as an editor. I'd give them advice on how to go away and work on that stuff and come back. Whereas I was kind of biting off more than I could chew.
As someone wanting to submit, how would a person know when their poems or manuscript was ready to be submitted?
I'd say that the easiest way is to always get another set of eyes, get other people to look at it. And not just like, when sometimes people, when they first do an open mic and it's like they've read to their friends and their friends told them they're the best. I mean, another poet, another reader, someone who has a critical perspective. That's always a good way if you're not sure. Normally, it's just pieces that you feel are good, but you can't do much more with them. It's time to abandon them and send them away and see what they can do. If you're sending off to magazines, I always like the term, have the next envelope ready. Already assume it's going to get rejected and you're sending it to the next place. I would say don't worry too much. If it's not entirely ready, you're not going to ruin your career They're not going to basically send your name to a blacklist or something like that. You'll hopefully maybe get some feedback if it's not ready. If they like your work and they feel that you could be someone they'd work with, they'll probably give you some advice and some feedback.
And do you think that would be a positive sign if you got a rejection that actually had sort of advice and feedback in it?
Yes, definitely a positive sign, because you can take that to somewhere else as well. You know what I mean? If you get the feedback, you know it's worth it. So even if it's a rejection, but they reply and they really respond to your work and talk about your work, what they really enjoyed about it, what might need to be worked on, that's normally a really good sign either way. I only know one person who submitted to a massive publisher and got accepted. But what happened was, and normally you would never advise them to do it, but for some reason they just happened to go, oh, I'll look at this manuscript. And they still didn't get accepted the first time, but the publisher said, you know what? There's stuff I like about your work. Go and work on this. There were about 2 or 3 submissions, and then this massive publisher published this poet. The rejection is normally a good thing. The rejection with good workable details is normally a really good sign.
Amazing. Just before you go, would you be able to set as a writing task?
Yes. The writing task will be something meditative, I think. So I would say at some point, maybe in the next minute, maybe in the next few hours, you're going to end up looking at a screen. You will be in an environment where you're not looking at a screen, and then you will look at a screen. I would ask you to be mindful of what happens in your mind between the moment of being in the world, getting the urge to look at a screen, and then looking at a screen. And then maybe you'll think, I'm looking at a screen, I need to be in the world again. Be mindful of that and see if you can see what happens in your brain, in your head, in your mind, when you switch from being in the world to being in a digital world, and when you emerge back into the world, back in your body, back in your environment. I would just say, look out for that. And if anything interesting happens, write about it.
Beautiful. Niall, thank you so much. Nice.
Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.